Daniel Hayes stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black suit, surrounded by white roses, golden lights, and hundreds of important guests. As the CEO of a billion-dollar company, he was used to attention, but today all eyes were on him for a different reason: his wedding day. Soft music filled the grand hall as the doors slowly opened. Everyone turned to look at the bride, Emily Carter, walking down the aisle in a beautiful white dress. She looked nervous but happy, her eyes fixed only on Daniel. She had waited for this day for years. But Daniel was not looking at her. Instead, his eyes were locked on someone else sitting in the front row, Sophia Blake, his lover. She wore a tight red dress and a confident smile, as if she belonged there more than the bride. Some guests noticed Daniel's expression and began whispering quietly. Why is he looking at that woman? Isn't that his business partner? This is strange. Emily slowly reached the altar and stood in front of Daniel, waiting for him to smile, to hold her hands, to show some love. But Daniel just looked bored and distracted. He barely even looked at her. The priest began the ceremony, speaking about love, loyalty, and marriage. Emily listened with teary eyes, hoping Daniel would at least pretend to care. Then suddenly, Daniel interrupted. "Let's make this quick," he said coldly. "I have an important meeting after this." The hall went completely silent. Emily's face turned pale. Guests looked at each other in shock. The priest tried to continue, but Daniel pulled out his phone and started typing a message. A few seconds later, Sophia's phone buzzed, and she smiled while reading the message. Emily saw everything. Her hands slowly started shaking. She realized this was not nervousness anymore. This was humiliation. When it was time for the vows, Emily spoke with a trembling voice, full of emotion and love. But when it was Daniel's turn, he simply said, "Yes, I do," without even looking at her. No vows. No emotion. Nothing. At that moment, Emily understood something very clearly. She was not marrying a man who loved her. She was marrying a man who did not even respect her. And that was the moment her heart quietly broke, right there at the altar, in front of everyone. Long before the grand wedding hall, the expensive suits, and the powerful title of CEO, Daniel Hayes was just a young man with big dreams and empty pockets. He lived in a small apartment with barely enough money to pay rent. His days were filled with rejection emails, failed meetings, and sleepless nights. No one believed in his ideas. No one, except Emily Carter. Emily had known Daniel since their college days. She had seen something in him that others could not: his determination, his intelligence, and the fire in his heart. While others laughed at his dreams, she stood beside him quietly, always encouraging him to keep going. When Daniel lost his job, it was Emily who paid for groceries. When he could not afford his rent, she helped him without making him feel small. She even took extra shifts at work just so he could focus on building his startup. "I believe in you," she would always say with a soft smile. And Daniel did not forget that, at least, not in the beginning. There were nights when they sat together on the floor, eating cheap takeout, talking about the future. Daniel would promise her, "One day, I'll give you the best life. You'll never have to struggle again." Emily never cared about money. She only cared about him. Slowly, things began to change. One small business deal turned into another. Investors started noticing Daniel. His ideas worked. His company grew faster than anyone expected. Within a few years, Daniel Hayes was no longer struggling. He was successful, powerful, respected. And with success, came change. The man who once listened carefully now barely had time to talk. The man who once appreciated Emily's support now took it for granted. He became busy, distant, and cold. Expensive meetings replaced simple dinners. Business trips replaced quiet evenings together. And slowly, Emily felt like she was no longer part of his world. Then came Sophia Blake. She was everything Emily was not: bold, glamorous, and deeply connected to the world Daniel now lived in. Sophia knew how to impress powerful people, how to speak his language, and most importantly, how to make him feel important. At first, it was just business meetings. Then late-night conversations. Then secret dinners. Sophia admired his success, his money, his power. And Daniel, blinded by his own ego, mistook that admiration for love. He started comparing Emily to Sophia. Emily's simplicity began to feel like weakness to him. Her quiet support, once his strength, now seemed invisible. Without realizing it, Daniel slowly drifted away from the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing, and moved closer to someone who only valued him because he now had everything. And by the time he noticed the difference, it was already too late. The wedding ended, but not in the way anyone had expected. There was no joy, no laughter, no celebration. Guests left quietly, whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. Some felt sorry for Emily, others criticized Daniel, but no one dared to say anything openly. Emily did not cry at the wedding hall. She did not shout, argue, or create a scene. She simply smiled politely at the guests, thanked them for coming, and walked out with calm steps. But inside, her heart felt heavy and empty. That night, she and Daniel returned to their large luxury house, but it did not feel like a home anymore. Daniel walked in, took off his jacket, and poured himself a drink as if it were just another normal day. "You're overthinking the wedding," he said casually. "These events are business too. You should understand that." Emily looked at him quietly. She wanted to say many things, but she realized something important. The man she loved was no longer the same person. And no argument could change that. So she simply nodded and said softly, "You're right. I understand." Daniel assumed the matter was over. He believed she would calm down and everything would go back to normal. After all, she had always been patient, always understanding, always forgiving. But that night, while Daniel slept, Emily stayed awake. She opened the wardrobe and slowly started packing her clothes into a suitcase. She did not rush. She did not cry loudly. Silent tears rolled down her face as she folded each dress, each memory, each piece of her life with him. She looked around the room one last time, the big bed, the expensive furniture, the glass windows showing the city lights. None of it mattered to her. She had never loved the house, the money, or the status. She had only loved Daniel. She took a small piece of paper and wrote a short letter. "I stayed when you had nothing. I stayed when you were building everything. But I cannot stay where I mean nothing. I hope one day you understand what you lost. Goodbye, Daniel." She placed the letter on the table, picked up her suitcase, and quietly walked out of the house before sunrise. The next morning, Daniel woke up and noticed the empty side of the bed. He walked downstairs and found the letter. He read it once, then placed it back on the table and sighed. "She'll be back," he muttered to himself calmly. He went to work as usual, not realizing that Emily was not leaving for a few days. She was leaving his life forever. And that was the moment he made the biggest mistake of his life. He let her go without stopping her. At first, Daniel did not notice the silence in the house. He was busy with meetings, business deals, and traveling with Sophia. His life looked perfect from the outside, a powerful CEO, a beautiful woman beside him, money, success, and influence. But slowly, small things began to change. The house felt different. It was always clean, but no longer warm. The kitchen was full of expensive food, but no one cooked his favorite meals. His clothes were always organized, but not the way Emily used to arrange them. The small things he never noticed before suddenly became very noticeable. One evening, Daniel came home late from work. He loosened his tie and sat on the couch. The house was completely silent. No soft music, no light in the kitchen, no one asking, "Did you eat?" like Emily always did. He picked up his phone and almost called her, but then stopped himself. "She'll come back," he said quietly, trying to convince himself again. Meanwhile, Sophia started becoming more demanding. She wanted expensive trips, jewelry, a new car, and more attention. She did not care if Daniel was tired or stressed. She only cared about what he could give her. One night, during dinner, Daniel looked tired and quiet. "You're not listening," Sophia said angrily. "I was talking about the new apartment I want." Daniel sighed. "Sophia, I had a long day. Can we talk about this later?" She rolled her eyes. "You're always tired now. You've changed. You're not fun anymore." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had changed. But not in the way she meant. That night, Daniel went home and opened an old drawer looking for some documents. Inside, he found a small box. When he opened it, he saw old photos, pictures of him and Emily from their struggling days. In one photo, they were sitting on the floor eating noodles and laughing. In another, Emily was holding a small cake, celebrating his first business deal. He sat on the floor and looked at the photos for a long time. For the first time since she left, he felt something heavy in his chest. He remembered how she believed in him when no one else did, how she worked extra hours to support him, how she never complained, even when life was hard. And suddenly, he realized something that made his heart sink. Sophia loved his success. Emily had loved his struggle. Sophia loved his money. Emily had loved him. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but the feeling would not go away. The house, the money, the success, everything suddenly felt empty. The next day, he tried calling Emily. Her phone was off. He contacted her friends, her old workplace, even distant relatives, but no one knew where she was. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Hayes, the powerful CEO who could find anything with money, realized he could not find the one person who truly mattered. And that was when regret finally began to consume him. Almost a year passed before Daniel finally found Emily. It happened by accident. He was in another city for a business conference when he walked into a small bookstore to escape the rain. The place was quiet and warm, filled with the smell of coffee and old books. As he walked between the shelves, he suddenly saw someone behind the counter. It was Emily. For a moment, he thought he was imagining things. She looked different, simpler, calmer, and somehow stronger. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were modest, but her face looked peaceful in a way he had never seen before. She looked up and froze when she saw him. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. "Emily," Daniel finally said softly. She remained calm. "Hello, Daniel." Her voice was polite but distant, like she was talking to a stranger. "I've been looking for you everywhere," he said. "I called everyone. I tried to find you for months." Emily nodded slowly. "I know. But I needed to disappear. I needed to find myself again." Daniel looked at her with regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Emily. I was blind. I forgot who stood beside me when I had nothing. I forgot who loved me before I became successful. I lost the most important person in my life because of my ego." Emily listened quietly. She was not angry anymore. She was not even sad. She had already cried all her tears long ago. "I loved you when you were nobody," she said gently. "But you stopped loving me when you became somebody." Daniel lowered his head. He had no excuse, no explanation, no defense. "Can you forgive me?" he asked quietly. Emily smiled softly. "I forgave you a long time ago, Daniel. But forgiveness does not mean I can go back and live the same life again." Her words were calm, but they hit him harder than any anger could. "You were my whole world once," she continued. "But I learned how to live without you. And now, I am happy again." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes full of regret and understanding. This was the consequence of his choices. This was the price of taking love for granted. He left the bookstore that day alone, but a different man. He finally understood something he should have understood long ago. Never take loyal people for granted. Because sometimes, when you finally realize their value, they are already gone.